Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to TinyKeyHoleMinis. I'm Jolene, and today I'm going to show you how I created these World War I relics. I made two different style gas masks and a couple accessories. Some of these belong to Miss Margo's husband and will be going up in the attic. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about who he was. Now I have two different styles. One has the respirator actually attached to it, and the other one has a respirator can that attaches to a nozzle in the mouthpiece. Now, Miss Margo's husband was Sergeant Charles Henley. He was born in 1859. In 1914, he was 55, and that's when World War I happened, and he was drafted as sergeant. Can you imagine being drafted to the war in your mid-50s? His father was a military man, so he grew up living the military life with lots of training. And because of that, he wanted to live a simple life on the farm. He didn't want his own family going through the same lifestyle that he grew up knowing. His father was colonel, and he was best friends with his field marshal. They worked side by side together as equals. He was an honorable man, and the military depended on him. And that kind of passed down to Charles. But because of his lifelong training and who his father was, he earned the ranking of a sergeant. Now he could have ranked higher, but this was his father's life, and it was handed to him. He didn't choose it. He was more of a humble man and just wanted a simple life. Charles was an honorable man as well and was highly respected. He was an outstanding citizen. He loved his country, but he didn't want to live for his country. The military respected this because of who his father was. So they drafted him to train other militants to become sergeants. But he served 2 out of 4 of the years, and he was released to return home when he was 57. So luckily for him, he only had to endure 2 years. He died 11 years later when he was 68 in 1927. The current year of the Josephine House is 1932. Miss Margo was born in 1861 and she's 71. She's only 2 years younger than her husband. I'm going to show you this can first because I didn't show how I made it. I'll just explain it. I took one of these resin molds of a fancy little jar that I had, and it has a hole in it. And I just saved all the ones that I made that had imperfections in case I could use it for something else. This is the exact piece that I used. If you have molds that have imperfections, do not throw them away. Save them because you may come up with other ways to use them. The first thing I did was wrap the jar with aluminum tape, and for the detailing around the can, I used a piece of string and wrapped that with aluminum tape and then just glued it around the midsection and the bottom. For the top, I traced the opening of the jar onto cardstock and used about 5 layers, glued them together, and added another piece of cardstock around for the rim. And then I covered that piece up with the aluminum tape as well. I gave the can a base coat of black chalk paint, and then I used Tester's model paint, which was called Steel. For the rest, I used a watered down burnt sienna, and I watered it down so that it wouldn't be so vibrant and that it would kind of drip down the side of the can. For the brackets on the side that hold the straps, I created kind of like these triangle jump rings. I'm going to show you how I created those for the next accessory in a little bit. But I also created a square one the same exact way that you see on the front of the can. Last, I coated it with a matte varnish, and that is how I created this gas can. I'm going to begin with the mask that has the separate gas can that hooks up to the mouth nozzle. I'm using this piece of canvas, and I use this canvas for all of the masks. I cut 2 holes for the eyes, and I'm just going to use this sculpting tool to kind of widen the holes a little bit so that I can fit the metal grommet piece inside. And I'm just going to glue them into place with some super glue. I'm just pressing them nice and tight into place to make sure that they're nice and secure. For the lenses, I'm using this really hard plastic that I salvaged from a package. It's the same plastic that I used for the window in the attic. And I'm just using a hole puncher to punch out a couple pieces for the lenses. They were perfect size and they're nice and hard. So I'm going to glue these on top of the metal pieces. And then on top of the lenses, I'm going to add a couple jump rings. I'm just opening them slightly just to line them up. And then I'll glue them into place with some super glue. They kind of remind me of Minion goggles. Okay, so now I'm going to just discolor the canvas a little bit with some brown chalk pastels. And I'm going to make 2 of these. So right now I am preparing another section before I add the eyes. I should have did this before the eyes, but I didn't think about it till after I put the eyes in. I'm going to color the lenses with a yellow Sharpie marker, but I had to wait until the glue was completely dried because for some reason it has a reaction with the marker and turns red. I'll show you what I mean later on. You'll see a little bit left behind on one of the masks. Now I'm going to go in with a pencil and just kind of sketch out a shape for the mask. I cut the piece out, but I'll trim the mask out in a little bit. Right now, I'm cutting a hole for the mouth. And I'm just going to use this same sculpting tool to kind of widen the hole a bit. This tool comes in really handy. I'm going to add another jump ring around the opening of the mouth. And I decided to add a jump ring to the end of the little hose here, just for added detail. I feel like it's more complete now. I'm going to go ahead and cut the mask out, but I still have to add the nozzle piece to the mouth. I'm going to go ahead and shape it, and I'm using a fabric stiff, but a watered down glue solution will work the same. I'm just using the roller to help shape it along the way, and I'm just going to play with it until I'm happy with the shape, and then I'll set it aside to dry. I will be reshaping the mask as I go along, so I do this a few times. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on the little oxygen can with the hose, the little respirator can. My sister gave me a bunch of these. They're some sort of electrical component. I did look them up, but I forgot what they were called. They came in different sizes, and this was the smallest one. She also gave me the idea to use one of these for this project, and it worked out amazingly. So I'm going to show you how I transformed that piece into this piece. This little metal piece is connected to a copper wire that runs through the spring, so I just popped that off. Now the first one, I cut the copper wire off, but on this one, I'm going to leave it for some added support. For the spring, I'm going to take a thin piece of wire, and this wire is super bendable and flexible. I'm going to slide it into the very second ring on both ends. I don't want it to be attached to the very first ring because it's going to interfere with the metal pieces that I'm going to add on later on. So I'm attaching it to the second ring on both ends. And then I'm just going to close it up with a pair of pliers and just squeeze it nice and tight. This will attach the wire to the spring. Once I have this wire nice and secure, I can go ahead and bend the spring any way I want, and the wire will help it keep its shape. I'm going to use some of this tissue paper and cut a strip off of that. I'm going to add tacky glue and wrap it around the spring, and this will be kind of like the outer material of the hose. I'm leaving a little bit of the tissue paper to hang over each end so that I can tuck that in later on. Once I have the spring completely covered, I'm just tightening the paper up around the spring so that the ridges are exposed and it kind of looks like an accordion hose. Then I'll go in and tuck in the ends so that you don't see the metal. I picked out two different bead spacers and I'm going to glue these to each end of the hose. This is the smaller spacer. It's going to connect the hose to the nozzle and the mouthpiece. This is the bigger spacer. It's going to connect the hose to the can, and it kind of looks like the metal piece on the end of a garden hose. Next, I'm going to cut out a piece of this aluminum pie pan, and I'm going to be wrapping the base of the can with this. Okay, I got my piece cut out, and I'm using a little ball stylus to just kind of create some lines and impressions in the tin just to give it some added detail. I'm not trying to be perfect about this, and I'm just kind of adding maybe about 4 or 5 lines. I just wanted to have some sort of detail on the outside of the can. I'm going to wrap it around the square base nice and tight. And once I get this shaped out, I'm going to cut it off, trim it down, and then I can go ahead and use super glue to glue it onto the base. Now it looks like a little tin can. And I'm going to add a little skinny strip around the top for added detail. I'm just doing the same thing, and I'll snip it off and glue it into place. For added detail to the top, I'm adding 2 jump rings around the copper wire. One jump ring is bigger than the other, so the smaller one just kind of sits inside the bigger one. And then I can go ahead and add the hose. To age it, I'm mixing up some black acrylic and regular rubbing alcohol. This works really good on metal pieces, and I like using it better for metal versus watered down acrylic. It sticks really well and it dries super fast. A little trick I learned from Little Gretchen's workshop. So I'm just going to dab it around the can, take a cotton swab, and dab off the excess. Once it's nice and dry, I'm going to add some rust. So I'm watering down a little bit of burnt sienna, the same way I did with the round can, and I'm just going to apply it to kind of make it look like it's dripping down. Once this little piece is completely dry, I'll give it a coat of matte varnish. Okay, moving on to this style gas mask. I painted the canvas. For the first one, I painted it brown. This one, I painted it green. And I'm just poking the holes for the eyes. So this is basically going to be the same process that I just used on the other mask that has the separate respirator. For the brown one, it's shaped more rounder and it goes back a little further on the head. I used a different process for that. To shape that, I actually used a tinfoil mold and I molded it to the tinfoil. I used a rubber band to attach it to the foil. I let it dry and then I cut the mask down. This one's a bit simple, so I'm just going to go with this process. So it's the same thing. I'm gluing the metal brackets into the eyes. I'm gluing the lenses on the metal brackets, and then I'm gluing the jump rings onto the lenses. And then I cut the piece out. To create the respirator that will be attached, I'm using a piece of the tin pie pan, and I'm just sketching a rainbow shape with my ball stylus. I also want to create some lines for added detail, so it's really going to look just like a little rainbow, minus the color. Once I cut it out, I'm just using this tool to kind of shape it. It's going to kind of look like a cone. It's going to be smaller on one end and wider on the other. So it's kind of tapered down. And I've picked out a bead that's going to sit on the very end. I'm going to glue this piece together and trim it down. To prepare the little bead before gluing it on, I'm going to use a bead cap. And I'm actually just going to clip out the middle section of this. So I don't need the outer band. But I am going to save this because it's kind of cool looking. Now I'm just going to glue that piece right onto the bead. And it'll look like the filter. Okay, I'm taking a skinny strip like I did with the can. And I'm just going to shape it around the tool. This piece is going to be added onto the smaller end where the mouthpiece is. And it's just going to give it added detail. So I'll glue that into place. I'm going to go ahead and add a jump ring to the larger end, then glue the bead right onto the jump ring. I'm taking a wider strip of the pie pan and I'm going to shape it just like I did the smaller one, making it a little larger. This is going to be glued right around the bead, hiding the connecting points of the bead and the jump ring. I'm giving it a nice base coat of black chalk paint. While that's drying, I'm going to finish coloring the lenses. I'm using skinny strips of fabric to glue around the masks to hide the edges. And I'll color or paint any of the lighter fabric later on. I've cut a hole in the mouth, and this time I'm going to add the grommet the opposite way. So the metal piece will sit on the inside. This way the mouthpiece will have something to attach to. Once I get this secure, I'm going to add a jump ring. Before I add the respirator, I'm going to use a stamper and some metallic silver paint and just kind of stamp it around. The black will make the metal look like it's worn down. Okay, I've attached it to the mask with super glue and it's attached right to the metal grommet. Now I'm going to shape it a little more with some fabric stiff. While that's drying, I was thinking of making a water canteen. I could very well make a metal one, and I'm still thinking I might do that as well. But right now, I just want to use up some of this scrap fabric. So I'm going to go for a canvas canteen, and I'm going to shape it kind of like an oval shape. So I'm just trimming it down and cutting out the piece. I'm going to use a piece of cardstock to stiffen up the fabric. This will be the inside structure. I left the fabric a little wider than the cardstock so I can fold it over and glue it around the edges so they can be covered. Now I'm going to glue this piece together with fabric tack. For the bottom, I used a wooden craft stick. I cut it in an oval shape and covered it with the canvas and just glued it in place. For the top, I could not get it to work out with wood, so I traced the oval shape onto cardstock, used about 4 or 5 layers, glued them together, and to create the dome, I used a little bit of cotton and fabric stiff to shape it. I'm going to cover it up with a piece of canvas, and then I'll just paint it after I glue it into place. I'm using fabric tack to glue this on, and I've just made a few snips around the curve so that I can fold it nice and tight and cover it up. Before I glue everything together, I'm going to make the little brackets for the strap, and I'm going to glue those on first. So I'm taking a piece of the pie pan and just curving the ends to make a little tube, and then I'm going to snip it off. I'm going to take a piece of wire and just kind of shape it into a triangle and it's going to end up being like a triangle-shaped jump ring. Okay, now I can slip each end of the triangle into each end of the tube and just squeeze it closed. And now I have a little bracket that will hold the strap. I'm going to make another one for the other side. Now that I've covered the top part, it's a little too big and it won't fit into place. I came up with a solution to use my pliers. I'm just giving it a nice squeeze around the sides to just try and make it fit. This seems to be working, so I'm going to keep going and squeeze it a little more until it fits. Almost there, but not quite yet. This is really working though, so I'm going to give it a few squeezes around the ends and see how that does. It's also just helping it to curve upward a little more to create more of a dome. I'm going to glue it into place with tacky glue, and that worked out perfectly and I didn't have to remake it. Okay, it's time to paint it, and I'm using an acrylic paint that's called Campground Green. It's kind of like an army dark green. And I'm just making sure that none of the original canvas is showing. I'm going to make a little strip by gluing the sides over, kind of like a little hem, and this will go around the connecting points. I'm gluing both sides and folding them over to the back to meet each other in the middle. First, I'm going to use super glue to glue the brackets into place. I glued the trimming around the top and over the brackets. This will also help the brackets stay nice and secure over the years. And now I'm just touching it up with a little bit of paint. Next, I'm going to age it with the same solution of black acrylic paint and rubbing alcohol. I'm making sure to go around all the creases to give it more contrast and shadowing. Now I'm going to rough it up. I'm going to use a nail file to sand it down and just wear down the paint. It looks super white right now, but I'll use my fingers to rub it down a little more and it'll just make the paint look faded. Now it's time to add the strap. I'm using fabric tack to glue the straps into place. I've put them through the little jump ring, and now I'm just going to fold the end over and attach it to itself so it looks like it's sewn that way. For the top, I'm using the same two bead spacers that I picked for the Respirator hose and a jump ring. So I'm gluing the jump ring down first. Then I'm taking the bigger bead spacer, gluing it into place. Then I'm adding the smaller bead spacer for the very top. Now I'm going to add a nail head bead pin to the very top to close up the hole. To finish it off, I've dirtied up a chain with black acrylic and alcohol, and now I'm just gluing that into place. Okay, my water canteen is complete, and I still have that metal one stuck in my head, so I think I'm going to create that and add it to the set that will be placed in my Etsy shop. It's time to finish off these masks, and you can see where that red is right here on the lens. I was able to clean off most of it, but I decided to leave a little bit left behind on the green mask. I've picked out these little metal beads, and I'm going to place them in the mouth. I'm just going to use some super glue and glue them into place. These were the perfect little beads because they look like little nozzles. And now the hose can have something to hook up to. I'll leave them separate, but they could be glued into place. Okay, to age up the green mask, I'm using a watered down black acrylic. I've already painted over the original canvas that was exposed. And I'm just going in around the edges and the eyes with the black acrylic. For the lighter masks, I'll do the same thing, but I'm going to use brown. Once that's complete, I'm going in to dust it with a dry brush of white acrylic. This will bring out some highlights and make it look a little worn down. Last, I'll go in with a tiny emery board just to rough it up a little bit. I'm almost done, tiny friends. I need to add the straps. So I'm using this scrap ribbon and I've cut it down into smaller pieces. I'm using a sewing pin and I'm just going to push it through the piece of ribbon, kind of like a zigzag back and forth, and just kind of crinkle it up. Every now and then, I'll just twist the ribbon around the pin instead of pushing it through, just to give it a different fold. Once this is completed, I'm just going to dip it into the fabric stiff and let it dry completely. Now that it's dried, I've pulled out the pin and I'm just pulling the strap out so that it loosens up. Some of it is frayed and I like that, but I'll snip most of that off to clean it up a bit. To color it, I'm using a little bit of yellow chalk pastel, and then I'll go in behind it with a little bit of brown. With the brown, I'm just touching it here and there around the edges, just to dirty it up a little more. Now I can cut my straps down to size and begin to add them to the mask. But first, I'm going to fold over the ends and glue them down to each other to make it look like they were sewn that way. Those will be on the outside of the mask so that detail can be shown. Each mask has a set of 2 straps on each side and a set of 3 straps on the top. Each set will have smaller straps that will connect to the longer strap, and then they'll all connect together in the middle behind the mask. And I'll show you what I mean when I put them on. So first, I'm gluing the ends, folding them over, and squeezing them nice and tight so they can attach securely. I'll begin with the middle section. I'm going to place a strap right in the very middle, making sure that the folded part is facing outward. I am starting with tacky glue, but I switch over to fabric tack because it works a lot better with thicker fabric and it attaches a lot quicker. So now I've got 3 straps in the middle section. The middle strap will be the longest strap. That's going to be the main strap. The 2 straps on the outside will be cut down shorter and attached to the middle strap. So it'll kind of look something like this. So I'm just snipping them down and I'll glue them into place. The sides are basically the same, only with 2 straps. There's a longer strap and a shorter strap that connects to the longer strap. Then the longer strap connects to the main strap in the back. And that completes my masks. Let's check out this comment from our tiny friend Wendy Walker, who suggests that I move the crutches over to the window and make one look like it's fallen over and has broken the glass on the window. I love that idea so much, Wendy. Thank you so much for suggesting that. And that is exactly what I did. So here you can see the crutches have been moved over and one has fallen over and broken the glass window. When you guys leave suggestions and ideas in the comments below, it allows me to incorporate that into this creation. And then that makes you a part of the Josephine house as well. And I love that. That means the most to me because we're all in this together. We're sharing our miniature visions with each other, and the Josephine house has a little bit of everybody in it. And I love that so much. It really does mean a lot for this project and this build. The Josephine house is growing far beyond what I can imagine or have anticipated. And I just love including as many of you as possible, whether you're a viewer or a content creator. I love the fact that there are so many of you included in this project. And I want to keep including as many of you as I can. So please keep leaving your ideas and suggestions in the comments below. I hope you all have enjoyed this project today. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have enjoyed it, please don't forget to click that like button and give it a thumbs up. As always, I'd like to thank you all for subscribing and welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you all so much for joining my miniature journey. I am so excited that you guys are enjoying my miniature creations. I am quickly approaching my 5K, and I have something super special planned for my 5K celebration. So please continue to subscribe, continue to share, and definitely continue to comment. I also want to thank you all for the get wells and your sweet comments. I feel so much better, so thank you all for your support. And until next time, tiny friends, I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye bye.